Today at 6, the deadly attacks in Austria's capital. Authorities say the gunman was an Islamist terrorist. Eyewitness footage shows people fleeing as the gunman opened fire in 6 different locations in central Vienna. Police say he was shot dead within 9 minutes. But in that time, 4 people were killed and over 20 injured. The Austrian Chancellor has led the tributes. There's mounting concern across Europe, and this evening the UK terror threat level has been raised. Also tonight, Liverpool will be the first to get citywide COVID testing, with some results within an hour. The rest of us could get it by Christmas. Voting is underway across America. It could be the biggest turnout in a century. Biden versus Trump. It's been one of the most bitter and divisive election campaigns in living memory. We'll be reporting from Washington, from Pennsylvania and Florida. A story of survival against the odds. The young girl found after 90 hours under the rubble of Turkey's deadly earthquake.
And coming up on BBC News, manager Ryan Giggs will not be involved in Wales's 3 matches this November after he was arrested on suspicion of assaulting his girlfriend. Allegations he denies.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC's News at 6. The Austrian Chancellor has described last night's attack in the capital as an act of barbarism. 4 people were killed and nearly 24 injured when a gunman, described as an Islamist terrorist by the authorities, fired into crowds of people in 6 different locations. The attack took place in the city centre, where people were enjoying a last night out in restaurants and cafes before another coronavirus lockdown. Our correspondent Jenny Hill is in Vienna for us tonight. Jenny.
Yes, Vienna has long enjoyed a reputation as a safe city, immune to the kind of Islamist terrorism that's torn through so many other European capitals. Last night, all that changed when a young man who police say was armed with an assault rifle and a machete carried out a deadly attack on the very heart of the city. Violence, confusion on the streets of Vienna. People fled as shots were fired and armed police raced to secure the city. It was the eve of a corona lockdown. Many had gathered for a last night out in a city with a reputation for safety.
Just heard shots everywhere, and the police, the helicopters were flying around us, and we got really afraid, so we decided to hide ourselves in the restaurant.
Caught on camera, a man thought to be the perpetrator. This rabbi told us he'd looked out of his window to see him shooting, apparently at random.
I saw the attacker with a long weapon, a rifle or a gun, running around, shooting at people, targeting people, sitting outside the bars and pubs, which are lined along the street.
Just days after terror attacks in France, another country mourns its dead. Among the victims, an elderly man and woman, a young passerby and a waitress. Others are in hospital, critically injured. The hunt for suspects continues. Detectives have made several arrests, but attention's focused on the 20-year-old gunman shot dead by police last night.
The shooter was born in Austria. He has a migration background from northern Macedonia, and he was in prison because he's a supporter of the Islamic State. But of course we will have to find out the details in the next days.
Vienna's streets quiet today. Fear and corona have brought the city centre to a near standstill. But Moritz, a doctor, told us he felt compelled to do something.
It's really hard to show that you're grieving, because nobody should be outside. And I want to grieve, I want to show sympathy.
As you'd expect, there's shock here, there's disbelief, but there's also a sense of resignation. This has become a depressingly familiar scenario for Europe. A city centre, streets which felt safe, transformed in a matter of minutes. The question for Austria now is this: will last night's attack change the country? And if so, how? For now, though, a quiet defiance. Last night, as violence raged outside, members of the city's Philharmonic Orchestra were trapped in their concert hall. They chose, quite simply, to play on. Jenny Hill, BBC News, Vienna.
Well, this afternoon the government raised the terror threat level here in the UK to the second highest level. Our security correspondent Frank Gardner is with me. Frank, what's the thinking behind the government taking this action here?
It's a precautionary measure, they're saying. The decision was taken by something called JTAC, which is the Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre that sits inside the MI5 building. And really, from the moment this attack happened, they started analysing it and thinking, what does this mean for the UK? And they've looked at the attacks that have happened in France, in Nice, in north of Paris, and now in Austria, and decided that it's time to move the terror threat level up from being likely to highly likely. Now, what difference is that going to make to you and me and most of us? Not a great deal. It'll increase the security around some buildings. But the fact is that we are in quite a dangerous period right now, because often these attacks have copycat effect. They can also provoke attacks from the other side, from far-right extremists who will want to take some sort of revenge. And all of this is against a backdrop of a continual exhaustion by ISIS and Al-Qaeda to their followers to carry out attacks for what they see as an ongoing assault on their religion. So these are dangerous times.
All right, Frank, thanks very much. Now, when the Prime Minister announced the new coronavirus lockdown over the weekend, we were all shown a chart which suggested there could be up to 4,000 deaths a day if no action was taken. Today, the government's chief scientific advisor, Sir Patrick Vallance, has defended his use of that study after MPs criticised him for being alarmist. Our science editor, David Shukman, reports.
It's the risk of the health service being overwhelmed that suddenly changed government policy. A decision based on scientific projections for how many thousands the virus might kill in the coming months. But looking at this official graph, what are the real chances of the worst scenario being right?
As the chief scientific advisor
That's the question that MPs raised today, putting the government's top advisors on the spot.
You don't think that you just frighten people who do not have your scientific background and understanding of models and not...
Well, I hope not. I mean, I think I hope not, and that's certainly not the aim. It's very difficult to project forward in a way that doesn't inevitably lead to a problem of, is that real? No, it's not real. It's a model, but it is what we need to understand, because this is a disease which is spreading, like all epidemics, in a way that will affect us in weeks to come, but isn't felt today.
Some of the projections for future deaths were made before the regional three-tier system had any effect. And like any computer models, they're meant to be a guide to what might happen rather than a firm prediction. So is there a clear sense of the impact of the virus? Today we got the latest figures for what are called excess deaths. That's deaths above average, shown on this line here, based on data over the last 5 years. Back in April, losses were massively above that average line, and nearly all of them were because of COVID-19. And looking more recently, there are signs of another increase in deaths above average, and the main cause is COVID. The number of hospital admissions is the key indicator of what's happening right now. And whatever the arguments over future scenarios, there's a warning that things are mostly going the wrong way.
The rates are still steadily tracking up in all the data that I have seen in the older age groups, who are the ones who are likely to translate into hospitalisations, ICU cases and deaths.
The reality is that on average, someone who's infected is spreading the virus to more than one other person. And the hope is that the new restrictions will help to reverse that. David Shukman, BBC News.
Voting is underway in one of the most divisive US presidential elections in decades, pitting incumbent Republican Donald Trump against his Democratic challenger Joe Biden. Nearly 100 million people have already cast their ballots in early voting, putting the country on course for its highest turnout in a century. Now, we'll be reporting from right across America. But first, here's our North America editor, John Sopel. John.
George, thank you very much. If you're a lover of democracy, it's hard not to celebrate the fact that so many people want to line up and go and vote. It is extraordinary, the level of turnout. But the joy of voting is also being matched by a serious trepidation about what might come next. It is a fragile moment, a pivotal moment for America, a divided nation. Those issues, those arguments will probably rumble on for days. Today, though, it's about getting out the vote. A pandemic, a president hospitalised in the midst of the campaign, racial unrest, an economic shutdown, billions of dollars spent by the two candidates, and now, today, finally, the sun is rising on polling day. America's exhausting, seemingly endless election has reached its climax. Unprecedented numbers, nearly 100 million voted early, but big numbers are turning out today as well.
I voted for the greatest president in history, Donald J. Trump.
Trump is doing nothing for us.
He's going down today.
Donald Trump returned to Washington last night after a grueling final day of 5 rallies in 4 states. And this morning, sounding croaky and weary, he denied reports that he might try and claim an early victory before all the votes are counted.
When there's victory, if there's victory, I think we'll have victory. I think the polls are, suppression polls, and I think we'll have victory, but only when there's victory. I mean, there's no reason to play games.
Joe Biden returned to his childhood home of Scranton, Pennsylvania, actually returning to the house where he grew up. The president was here yesterday. Make no mistake, Pennsylvania is absolutely key to this election.
The third reason I'm running is what I want to talk upbeat about today, and that is uniting this country. We have to unite the country. We can do it. I think the country's ready.
A quirky tradition of US elections is that the first place to vote is the small village of Dixville Notch in the mountains of New Hampshire. At midnight, the polling station opened. It closed a few minutes later.
All in favour? Aye. Polls are closed. I need to count.
I'm a lifelong Republican, voting for Joe Biden for president.
And that, in a nutshell, will decide this election. How many people feel like that?
One can put one here, one can put one here.
In the oldest political slogan in the book, is it time for a change or 4 more years? But divided America is bracing for unrest, whether here in the nation's capital, the shishi shops of Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills, or the financial centre of New York. This is a nation that's not at ease with itself. John Sopel, BBC News, Washington.
As we've been hearing, an unprecedented number of people have voted early, most of them by post. That's been contentious, with Donald Trump saying the process is open to fraud. He says he has his lawyers ready. Clive Myrie is in the key battleground state of Pennsylvania on why a legal argument could delay the result. Clive.
Yeah, hi there, George. If you look at all the paths, or pretty much most of them, running towards the White House, then victory for Joe Biden or Donald Trump. Most of those roads run along the main streets here of Pennsylvania. So this is a keenly watched state, not least by the lawyers. And with more than 2.5 million absentee ballots still to be counted, and that process only began this morning, then it could be some time before either man knows whether or not they've won.
America is unnerved, but energized. The mining of votes by the campaigns is now over on this election day. And Norb Dotzel, who helps run a family quarry business in rural Pennsylvania, is adamant his voice will be heard. He'll vote in person. He doesn't want to risk a mail-in ballot, despite coronavirus.
Good, good.
Bottom line is you just don't trust it.
I don't trust him. No. I don't trust him. No. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist or anything like that. I just want to know, I'm going to go do it the way I always did it. I'm just going to go do it the way I always did it. You know, they have all these safety protocols in place, 6 feet, wear the mask, all that stuff. So, you know, if they're so sure that that works, why shouldn't I be sure it works?
Studies show Republicans are more likely to vote in person than Democrats, whose worries about COVID-19 have seen an extraordinary rise in mail-in votes.
Your voice matters, and it will only be heard if you vote.
Whatever the method, the exhortation for voters to do their duty has been heard loud and clear in an election that pits two very different ideas of what a future America should look like.
Do something about everything.
But for some, despite the enthusiasm, there is a darkness over this exercise of democracy, with threats of lawsuits to try to invalidate the votes of many.
Hi, Jacqueline.
Hi, Jacqueline Victor is 23 and voted by mail in Pennsylvania last week. A Democrat, she believes Donald Trump in suggesting without any evidence that postal ballots are susceptible to wide-scale fraud is trying to steal the election.
I think he wants his people to turn out in big numbers, and he's afraid of people like me, of younger people, you know, voting, or maybe people who weren't able to get to the polls on election day. He wants to delegitimize those people, and I do think he is trying to take away people's voice.
Yeah, we don't.
Norb Dotzel and his 84-year-old father make their way to the polls.
Yeah.
Like millions of others today, in what is a sign of America's democratic strength. But lawyers on both sides are watching closely, especially in crucial swing states like this, a sign that weakness might also lurk at the heart of the American idea. Clive Myrie, BBC News in Pennsylvania.
So how does the US election work, and when are we likely to get a result? Well, firstly, a candidate can win the most votes nationally but still lose the election. That's because the US has what's known as an electoral college voting system. To be elected president, a candidate must win at least 270 electoral college votes. Each state gets a certain number of these votes, mainly based on its population. The most populous state, California, gets 55 votes and tends to vote Democrat. Others vote Republican. Tennessee, for example, which is smaller and has only 11 electoral college votes up for grabs. So the contest is fought hardest in the so-called swing states, seen here in purple. And one of the first indications we'll get of how the night's going will be when the result comes through from one of those key states, Florida, for instance. Nomia Iqbal is in Miami for us. So what's the mood you're getting there, Nomia?
It's excitement on both sides. More than 9 million people have already voted here in Florida, George, and there's many more yet to go. The First Lady, Melania Trump, has already voted this morning, and the last polling station closes in around about 7 hours' time. But the state laws here in Florida means that the ballots have already been counted. So as you say, we will get an early sense this evening of how this presidential race is shaping up. Donald Trump has a mansion here. He votes here, and unless he wants to retire here in January, he needs those 29 electoral college votes that Florida has to offer. It's a lot simpler for Joe Biden. If he wins Florida tonight, it's more or less guaranteed that he will get the keys to the White House.
And thank you, Nomia. Well, you can join us tonight for our US election special results programme from 11:30 p.m. on BBC One, the News Channel and iPlayer. There will also be results coverage across BBC Radio. And the time is 18 minutes past 6. Our top story this evening. The Austrian Chancellor has described last night's attack in the capital as an act of barbarism. 4 people were killed when a gunman fired into crowds of people in 6 different locations. While we've been on air, the Islamic State has claimed responsibility. And still to come, why sports bodies are warning about the impact of coronavirus restrictions on children's physical and mental health.
Coming up on Sports Day on BBC News, the Super League playoffs have been brought forward to next week after Hull KR ended their season early on Tuesday because of a COVID-19 outbreak.
Now, Liverpool is to become the first city in the UK to trial a new coronavirus testing programme. From Friday, anyone will be able to get a test, whether they have symptoms or not. Some people will be given their result within an hour. If the pilot scheme is successful, it could be rolled out to other towns and cities. Up to 3,000 military personnel will be drafted in to help carry out the rapid turnaround tests. Here's our health correspondent, Dominic Hughes.
But what did the wars do to people's faith?
Like so many others across the country, pupils at St Margaret's Academy in Liverpool are making up for time lost during the first lockdown.
The imagery tends to be a little bit more positive here.
The threat to their education from the coronavirus remains, especially from those who are asymptomatic, who don't yet have symptoms, but can still infect others.
It's hard for people to come out of work, out of school. We've been affected so badly already.
But what do these sixth formers think about the plan for citywide testing?
You've got to factor in all the people that don't want to get tested, because you can't force people to get tested.
People aren't being safe, especially in Liverpool. There's been a few cases where people just aren't sticking to isolation rules and stuff. So I think I can see it from that point of view why they want to do that.
People do live in fear about the coronavirus, and so it would settle a lot of people's minds if they knew a definite yes or no whether you've got it.
It's an opportunity to drive down the R rate.
The school's principal is Stephen Brierley.
I think if we've got good, accurate knowledge of who's got it and who hasn't, our schools will be safer because there'll be less asymptomatic people in school. There'll be fewer people who are infected, fewer people in schools who are infected, and therefore more children staying in school, more learning going on.
The Liverpool pilot will start this week. As well as existing swab tests, there will be what are known as lateral flow tests, which can provide a result within an hour without the need to use a lab. But organising a testing programme across an entire city will be a logistical challenge. The Army will once again help, as it did during the first wave of the pandemic.
They'll be there delivering things like logistics, planning, command and control, and making sure that such a very large-scale test, track and trace operation is done in a way that the military are used to and in a way that can deliver at pace and at scale.
Even a citywide testing programme won't be enough to stop COVID in its tracks. The basics, washing your hands, wearing a face covering, maintaining social distance, remain the best way to stop the spread of the virus. And there are big questions about how many people are going to want to self-isolate if they're not showing any symptoms, and how many will be willing to come forward for a test if it potentially means missing out on work and the pay that will bring.
Anytime you see fire in literature, you've got to think.
In a city that has seen some of the highest number of COVID cases in the UK, the big question is whether more testing will help slow or even reverse the spread of the virus and help keep places like St Margaret's free from infection. Dominic Hughes, BBC News, Liverpool.
Now, with just 2 days to go before the introduction of a 4-week lockdown in England, businesses are bracing themselves for more economic hardship after the summer reprieve. Our business editor, Simon Jack, has been speaking to business owners in Tring in Hertfordshire, currently a Tier 1 area, to gauge their mood.
June feels like ancient history for business owners.
Which reduces capacity, presumably? Considerably. OK, fine.
We visited this pub in Tring, Hertfordshire, as Peter Borgneil showed us the time and money he'd spent to reopen his 28 pubs to be COVID safe.
And you've managed...
On Thursday, he has to shut them down again, till at least early December, and it's unclear what happens after that.
It's very difficult to plan. You know, we don't know whether we can take Christmas bookings and what shape we could take them in, whether we can have tables of 4 and 6 or not, because if you're in Tier 2 you can't. You know, it's all very, very difficult. We're all very suspicious. We don't trust the judgment of this government at the moment, and you know, we just need clarity.
Just 5 minutes down the road, this gym is also facing lockdown. Adam and Catherine Bell said they had just been rebuilding their business.
So we lost 250 members during the first lockdown. Literally last Thursday we hit the 100 mark of members coming back, and then the hammer blow of the weekend.
My worry is that they will continue lockdown through until Christmas, and you know, that for us will be devastating. You know, we've obviously got that responsibility to our members, our staff, but we've also got a house, we've got children that is coming up to Christmas. You know, our income's massively depreciated in that time. That on a personal level is heartbreaking.
The government has said it will pay 80% of wages of those businesses forced to close, and the self-employed will get 80% of their normal profits for November.
Christmas is around the corner, and this lockdown is going to take a massive chunk out of that crucial trading period, with no real certainty about what exactly is going to happen on December the 2nd. Many traders are worried they won't be able to sell the stock they were just feeling confident enough to buy in.
Greetings cards are considered non-essential retail, but with November a write-off, opening in December is essential.
We need to open on these in December. We need to open, and our sales have we already lost of 190,000, and we just need to shift the stock in December.
Economists predict this lockdown will be less severe than the last, but business and consumer confidence will take another beating, something that's precious and much harder to measure. Simon Jack, BBC News, Tring.
The Wales football manager Ryan Giggs has denied allegations of assault after police were called to his home on Sunday evening. Giggs was arrested and bailed after an alleged row with his girlfriend Kate Greville. The Welsh Football Association has announced that he will not be involved in the side's upcoming international camp. Sports bodies have criticised the government's decision to stop all children's sport outside of school for the 4-week lockdown period in England. They're warning of the impact on kids' physical and mental health, and adults too will be affected by the restrictions on sporting facilities, as our sports editor Dan Rowan reports.
Enjoying it while it lasts. Children making the most of Macclesfield's Moss Rose ground this week as the club opened its doors for training sessions before grassroots sport comes to a halt. Former Wales international Robbie Savage, who also coaches a local junior side, told me not giving youth sport an exemption is a mistake.
You know, I don't really understand it. For me, it's a huge part of their education, the mental health, the physical well-being of all these youngsters. For this to be taken away from them at this time is, for me, it can be so damaging.
The government says pausing sport will reduce transmission from mixing of households, but those involved insist there's minimal risk and want to play on.
We do it to play with our team, we make new friends, it's just an amazing part of our life, and if it goes, everyone's going to be really upset.
Scenes like this are about to be put on hold on grassroots pitches throughout England for the next month at least, and the fear is that the suspension of youth sport will have a damaging impact on youngsters' physical and mental health at a time when the amount of PE and sport in schools has been reduced because of the pandemic. Even non-contact sports like golf and tennis today learned they too will have to stop. Barbara Rosen's been a member at this course in Altrincham for 46 years.
I feel very sad because it keeps me going. I have a sick husband and this is a way of getting out. And this is all going to stop, and it's sad because we're all going to be locked indoors once again.
Indoor sports and gyms will also close. Maria Parker Harris found swimming helped her mental health after long-term fertility treatment. She's now a mother and believes passionately in the benefits of being in the pool.
Everybody says how important health and weight is to fighting COVID, and where better to do that and to deal with the oncoming mental health epidemic than in gyms and swimming pools, which are COVID safe.
Ministers say exemptions risk undermining the rules and people can have unlimited outdoor exercise for the next month, but stopping grassroots sport is proving controversial. Dan Rowan, BBC News.
Now, yesterday we brought you the story of one little girl, Elif, rescued from the rubble after that powerful earthquake in Western Turkey 4 days ago. One day later, and the miracle's been repeated. Rescuers say they heard another girl, Aida, call out from under a collapsed 8-storey apartment block. Our international correspondent, Ola Guerin, picks up the story.
Rescuers found her wedged in tight after she had called out. And this was the moment they recovered Aida Gezgin, not yet 3 years old. There were chants of God is greatest and a rush to cover her in a thermal blanket after her 91 hours beneath the rubble in Izmir. As Aida was carried away, she lifted the spirits of this bruised nation and of the exhausted rescuers. We started working through a small hole, said Ibrahim Topal. When we opened it more, we saw her face and her pretty green eyes, and we could hear her. It gave us new energy. On the way to hospital, Aida was asked what she wanted to eat. Meatballs, she said, and Ayran. That's a Turkish yogurt drink. Ida is now tucked up in hospital. She tells the nurse her tummy hurts, but her condition is said to be good. Another precious life saved. Orla Guerin, BBC News, Istanbul.
Wonderful. Time for a look at the weather now with Helen Willett. Hello, Helen.
Hello, George. Good evening. It won't surprise you when I say it's been the 5th wettest October since 1862. And November started on a fairly ferocious note, lots of wind and rain, but it's quietening down. The reason, high pressure. It's going to join us for the next 3 or 4 days, keeping those weather fronts at bay. So we replace the gales and the rain instead for autumnal frost and fog. And it's going to start tonight, the frost at least and perhaps some fog, but we've still got a rash of showers around, so that's a concern too. They'll continue in the north of Scotland in particular, 1 or 2 elsewhere, but they should fade away. But it is going to be the first widespread frost of the season across England and Wales, so with any surfaces still damp, I'm sure could be the risk of a little bit of ice as well. So widely frosty first thing tomorrow morning, crisp start for many. Although for Scotland, as I say, the north here, there's more cloud, there's further showers to come, and in fact later in the day tomorrow some longer spells of rain. Otherwise for many a crisp start. There might also be a little bit of mist and fog tomorrow morning. At this time of year there's very little strength in the November sunshine, so it will linger until the mid-morning. But once it clears, most will escape the showers away from the north and west with lighter winds. I don't think it'll feel quite as chilly as it has out and about today. Tomorrow evening and overnight brings the weather front a little bit further south. Not much rain on it, but preventing a frost for northern areas. Not quite as chilly either in the south, but still some pockets of frost around. It's more likely that Thursday will dawn on a foggy note. Quite widespread fog, particularly across England and Wales, we think, because there'll be a bit more breeze further north. But where the fog clears, and elsewhere further north, we'll see some sunshine as well. But at this time of year, some of the fog could linger all day, so it remains cold grey for much of the time. So we keep with our static weather pattern into the weekend at least. But by the time we get to Sunday, there's just a question mark about a weather front moving up from the south, George, and some more rain.
Helen, thank you. And that's all from the BBC's News at 6, so it's goodbye from me. And on BBC One, we can now join the BBC's news teams where you are.